Hi, well, it looks like I'm broadcasting. So anyway, my name's Lance Weber, and I am broadcasting live from the offices of the Human Rights Defense Center in Brattleboro, Vermont, just a hop, skip, and a jump from Keene, New Hampshire. I see that there's a chat box here, so anytime anybody has any questions whatsoever, feel free to chat me up. The title of this speech is Prisoner Outreach, How the Caged Can Help Advance Liberty. And it kind of struck me as a topic because there are so many political organizations or apolitical organizations or activist organizations that reach out to prisoners, yet I'm unaware of any either libertarian or anarchist or voluntarist or agorist organizations that do the same thing. As you all are probably aware, the United States of America, because we are number one, has the greatest percentage of prisoners of any nation in the world. Even though we've only got about 5% of the world's population, we have 25% of the world's prisoners. In the entire United States, there are about 2.5 million people right now sitting in cages. Many of you are aware that there are not good, just reasons for the imprisonment of most, if not all, of these people. Now, I'm not particularly sophisticated in the arguments for or against the abolition of prisons in general. However, the fact is these people are sitting in cages right now, and there are certain activities that they are still free to engage in, and we can, as activists, take advantage of the opportunities we have to reach out to these people in an effort to advance liberty and bring about the end of the institutionalization of the initiation of force through what we currently know as government. In the United States, we create about 1 million new felons every year. And I don't see that this is really on the downswing yet. It seems like this is a growth industry. I, in my capacity as in-house counsel here at the Human Rights Defense Center, read a lot of correspondence from prisoners. Just to give you a little background about the organization that I work for, Human Rights Defense Center is a not-for-profit organization that has many projects. One of those projects is the publication of a monthly 56-page magazine called Prison Legal News. The website prisonlegalnews.org is the first place to go, I guess, if you want to learn about that publication. Prison Legal News magazine frequently encounters difficulty in reaching its subscribers. The various prison and jail officials around the country have a tendency to try to censor our materials, and so that's where I come into play. We are currently involved in approximately 6 lawsuits all across the country in the litigation stage, where that means an active lawsuit right now, where Prison Legal News has been censored for all sorts of reasons ranging from it's not the Bible to it has staples to their objections to our advertising content. And in almost every case that I've seen, these reasons are completely pretextual, and I can only speculate because I'm not privy to the internal thoughts of the prison wardens and the jail administrators. However, I suspect that they really have an objection to the content of our magazine because we report on lawsuits and other prison and jail related news that frequently involves the misconduct of staff that operate these facilities. So in any event, part of what I have to offer people is the ability to help with prison and jail outreach. What I would suggest that people do is wherever you are, start looking around in your own backyard, look around in your own community for what's going on with incarceration facilities. What is the situation with the county jail in your county? What is the situation with the State Department of Corrections in your state? You will find that the rules and regulations with respect to what sort of information these staff and other officials running those places will give to you varies. However, there are different ways to get information about the current population in these prisons. Since imprisonment is the antithesis of liberty, we can only assume that this population of prisoners is very ripe for suggestion about libertarian ideals and the philosophy of freedom. With such a large population of prisoners, and many of these guys are extremely intelligent, the chances of us finding activists inside who can help us with the reduction of harm is great. In fact, Federal Bureau of Prison Regulations encourage prisoners to write letters to the editor, or to write manuscripts, or short stories or plays. The Code of Federal Regulations provides for prisoner correspondence to journalists and other news organizations to be treated with the same sort of special treatment that the correspondence to their own lawyers. They call it special mail. Legal mail is not supposed to be read by prison and jail staff. It's not supposed to be inspected for contraband or anything like that. It's supposed to be completely uncensored on its way out of the facilities into the hands of their lawyers, and the same is true for letters to news organizations. And so what we have here is an opportunity for people who have a lot of time on their hands to sit down and put their thoughts together and write persuasive letters to the editor, which have the potential to reach hundreds, thousands, or millions of people in some cases, depending on how slick they are and how persuasive they are. Right now, I'm currently engaged in litigating several cases about the interference that prison and jail officials will put up to correspondence with which they do not agree. And I suspect that if libertarian or anarchist activists are engaging in correspondence with prisoners, that they will run into some pushback from prison and jail officials about the manner of communication. This presents a unique opportunity for activists on the outside and the willing activists on the inside. That opportunity is an opportunity to engage in litigation, and I know that's something with a topic about which many of my cohorts in the Free State Project do not have the strongest feelings or kindest feelings. However, because I am a lawyer, I am trained in the law, it is a topic about which I'm particularly comfortable. So in any event, I see this as a valuable enterprise in which to engage, primarily because not only can you achieve real results, you also are pulling away resources that could otherwise be used to harm other people who have not yet been harmed by the system. So I would encourage everyone to engage in litigation with prison and jail officials whenever possible, assuming that, of course, they have valid, legitimate claims. Of course, nobody wants to be involved in a lawsuit that's considered a frivolous lawsuit, and it's just a waste of time. However, if you start to engage in this sort of activity, there will be no shortage of instances over which you could litigate, and frequently you will find that prison and jail officials will back down once you actually begin down the road of litigation. So in any event, the goal is not to litigate, but the goal is to get the message into the people on the inside of these cages. With respect to the message that you want to bring to prisoners, I don't know the statistics off the top of my head for what percentage of the prisoners currently incarcerated are in for crimes against the state, status crimes, so to speak, as opposed to crimes where there's a real victim. However, I suspect it's an enormous portion of the actual people imprisoned. These people seem like they might be especially receptive to the messages of liberty. And so, normally, from what I can tell, the vehicle by which political and other activists, communicate their message is some sort of a weekly or monthly or quarterly publication. These publications can often, if you're short on content, what you can do is start just creating a document that has some stock content that you can repeat. And of course, there's a plethora of content all over the internet that most, if not all, of the anarchist or libertarian authors would not hesitate to share free of charge. So in any event, what I might suggest is a monthly or weekly publication that is mailed to prisoners that includes detailed information about the facilities in which they're incarcerated, or if you plan on sending information to prisoners in a variety of facilities in one state, you might include some helpful information about that state's particular Department of Corrections. Generally when you start talking about the wardens and or senior staff and their salaries and their living accommodations, all of this information is public information. That's going to have a tendency to attract a great deal of interest from prisoners, and it's also going to have a tendency to attract a great deal of interest from prison and jail officials. Now, the one way in which the courts will consistently say that you're not allowed to communicate information to prisoners is if the information is adverse to the legitimate penological interests of the people in charge of the cages. So, for example, you will never get any court anywhere to agree that you can send in manuals about how to successfully tunnel out of a prison somewhere. Likewise, they will be loath to admit any material about locksmithing or hypnosis or hand-to-hand combat techniques. But any political message is going to be core protected speech according to the courts. And generally when you use the First Amendment as your sort of lodestar, it doesn't matter. You can cross the political spectrum and you can get people on the far left and people on the far right, or people who have abandoned the left-right paradigm. Everybody's going to agree to a certain extent that free speech is a prized value, and at least whether or not they truly believe that speech should be free and uninhibited, they'll want to line up with that value, because that's one of the sort of an instinctive part of being an American, is that we've got this right to free speech, and people like to believe that they truly have the right to speak freely and to criticize government. So what I'm getting at is the First Amendment and the right to free speech are very strong tools to use when you run into resistance, when you're trying to get your political message through to people on the inside of cages. So ideally you want to use a a publication, and it can be anything from 10-page photocopied newsletter to a slick high-dollar publication. But it doesn't matter as long as you've got it addressed properly to a prisoner on the inside, and then you follow up with a letter asking whether or not that prisoner has received it. You can open up the lines of communication, and you'll find that and of course nobody really wants to. Well, maybe some people do, but I would imagine most people don't really want to just open up a shop where they're going to wind up having a pen pal service. And that's not really the point of engaging in this sort of communication with prisoners. The point is obviously to spread the message of liberty, to present these people that are inside cages with information that allows them to break free of the left-right paradigm, and to see that the initiation of force is the root cause of all of these problems, and help them develop in their thinking to where they can get to a point where they can successfully and persuasively articulate reasons why their neighbors on the outside or on the inside should abandon the tendency to embrace the initiation of force. So, I guess for any activists out there who are interested in this topic and want to get started with it, what I would recommend you do is to start off by, like I said, looking in your own backyard at what sorts of facilities of confinement exist in your neighborhood, so to speak, and trying to find out as much information as possible about those facilities. What are their annual budgets? How many people do they hold? What sorts of people do they hold? What are the conditions of confinement? And then what are the mail policies that they have? Now, they should have mail policies that allow virtually uninhibited mail. Now, all the mail that goes into the prisons is read, and except for, well, it's supposed to be uncensored legal mail from attorneys. However, I know in a lot of cases the mail that I write to prisoners is opened and read outside of their presence. The law says that they're supposed to take these envelopes with legal mail and bring them right in front of the prisoner and open them up in front of the prisoner and hold the documents upside down so that they can't read them, and shake them to inspect for contraband before they deliver them to the prisoner. However, I get reports from lots of prisoners that they in fact receive my letters that have already been opened. Now, there's so many other issues about which we're fighting, and our resources are so slim that I don't have the time or wherewithal to litigate all those instances of illegal conduct. However, we look forward to a day when we will be able to take them to task for every time they violate our constitutional rights under those sorts of circumstances. Aside from setting up a sort of a newsletter or a magazine, or just even delivering letters for redistribution inside, people could engage in Books to Prisoners projects. There's a Supreme Court decision that basically allows for the distribution of books and other literature to prisoners so long as those books come from a publisher. It's called the Publishers Only Rule, and the definition of publisher has been expanded to include distributors, resellers, and book dealers of all sorts. So, what you could do if you're sitting in the middle of Iowa somewhere and you want to get active for liberty, you could start the Libertarian Books to Prisoners project. And that's all you need to do is just call yourself the Libertarian Books to Prisoners Project, or some other suitable, desirable name that you like, and start requesting book donations from other anarchist or libertarian or voluntarist activists all over the place. Have them ship their books to you, and you can start sending them to prisoners either at random or prisoners that you have identified by various research methods. When you get your first pushback, from a warden or jail administrator, then feel free to contact me for advice or guidance on how to proceed from there. But essentially what you want to do is you want to generate a good written record of the censorship, and give them plenty of opportunities to take it back and say they're sorry, and agree that your materials should in fact be allowed in. But the goal there is to get them to commit to the censorship, so that there's no going back on it later where they say, oh, it was just an accident, it was a mistake, it was negligence, we didn't really intend to do that. Then you don't get anywhere with that with the courts. Basically, you want to generate a fact pattern where there's no doubt about it. They're telling you that you're not allowed to distribute your books or your materials in their prison or jail. And then once you've got that fact pattern set up, I can help you find a lawyer pretty much anywhere in the country that will be willing to move that case forward for you, because of the fee shifting provisions of federal statutes that allow for the attorney's fees in such cases to be paid by the losing party, which will be the government in that particular case. As long as the message that you're conveying to these prisoners has nothing to do with an adversarial sort of incentive against the legitimate, so to speak, penological interests of the prison or jail officials, there should be no reason at all that they can point to say that your material should not get in. What's really shocking to me is how frequently and how often these sorts of people engage in censorship blatantly and seemingly without any awareness of the illegal nature of their conduct. You'll find it, if you just go and Google books to prisoners, you'll find lots of, sort of not-for-profit enterprises already established that engage in this kind of activity. And, and as far as I know, none of them are really focusing in on any one particular subject in general. And in fact, lots of the other activist sorts of organizations, I know Scientologists are a group who put a lot of resources toward prisoner outreach, but you'll also find that, I know that like the Nation of Islam has long been engaged in the activity of reaching out to prisoners inside. And like I said at the beginning of this discussion here, I don't really see any of that going on, as far as I can tell, from any libertarians or anarchists out there. Now I take that back. There are a few anarchist organizations that do reach out to prisoners. However, I've yet to familiarize myself with them. I've been too busy defending the rights of our agency to reach out to prisoners across the country. You will find that prisoners, just like everyone else, have different levels of sophistication and different levels of desire to participate in any sort of activity that would bring about any substantial change. I guess you do find that prisoners have a higher rate of illiteracy, and so that presents a problem. But the ones that are literate generally have a tendency to want to, they're conscious of what people might refer to as rights, and they have a willingness to engage in controversy that would normally be considered uncomfortable for people who are living on the outside and have no experience living in cages. You'll find that prisoners are not really afraid to confront their captors. And so once we can break through that sort of first barrier to the expression of this political message, then we've got really good opportunities here to basically create some what can be really extremely effective activists who will be able to write big picture type of essays or letters to the editor for publication in periodicals and magazines, newspapers, for distribution all across the country, if not all across the world. So, how do you find these people? Where do you go to find activists? Well, really, it's really just a big fishing expedition, honestly. You'll find by certain county jail websites will have inmate rosters where you can in fact see what people are in for, what sorts of crimes they're being held for, and how long they'll be in. And you can just start communicating with these people and say, here I'm the editor or founder of, and make up some publication, Freedom Weekly or Anarchist Monthly or anything that you find suitable or desirable. Just make it up, start publishing, and it can be as small or as big as your taste or your budget will allow. If you're interested in the general topic of prisons and jail, I guess one book that I would suggest people read is called With Liberty for Some. It's a history of 500 years of imprisonment in America. Scott Christensen is the author. With Liberty for Some, I would highly recommend people read that book. I don't suspect that most of the people that are in the audience today really need to be persuaded that it's generally a bad idea to cage people. However, believe it or not, some of the people that are sitting inside the cages actually do need some persuasion to bring them around to the idea that they probably shouldn't be in there in the first place. And I don't know what the real deal is behind that, if that's a psychological, sort of a conditioning that they've, suffered, but generally you don't have those hurdles with people who are in prison for crimes against the state. Drug crimes, you've got the 3-strike victims who are, people serving life sentences for nonviolent and victimless crimes against the state. These are particularly ripe prospects for us to reach out to turn into activists. One of the cases that I'm currently involved in Texas involved censorship of one of the books that we distribute at Prison Legal News, called Women Behind Bars. And Women Behind Bars was written by a researcher who traveled around the country interviewing female prisoners, and she put together her book, and one of the subjects about which she wrote was a doctor who's in prison, and I can't remember if she's in prison for murder or drug addiction or what, but basically this doctor is in prison and was telling about her history and what caused her to sort of steer off the straight and narrow path and wind up in a prison cell. And what she ultimately blamed it on was an incident from her childhood when she was forced into a sex act with a family member. So it's a very brief description where the author of the book begins to describe this female prisoner, and she says, when I interviewed the prisoner told me, and she calls her by name, she told me about an incident when she was 4 years old and she was forced into some sex act, and that was the source of all of the beginning of her problems. And that's it. That's all that she. And then she moved on to talk about that woman's the rest of her life, the rest of her professional life, and the events that led to her incarceration. And then, of course, the main focus of the story with respect to each one of these female prisoners was the conditions of their confinement and what their life is like now inside of prison. So the Texas Department of Corrections censored that book and would not allow that book into some of the people who had requested that book because they said it depicted a act of sex with a minor. Is completely absurd, of course, and the case was actually decided against us, where the district court judge decided that she had no right to second guess the warden's decision, or actually it's Department of Corrections their decision to censor this book, and that even though she concluded that it was not reasonable for them to take the position that this would be a harmful sort of thing for female prisoners, because basically 80% of women in prison right now have been the victims of sex crimes. So, they said the population of sex crime victims in prison is so great that we can't allow anything at all that would trigger a bad incident for any of these women. They care so much about these people that they just didn't want to allow these horrendously harmful materials in. So in any event, through the course of that litigation, we learned that the Texas Department of Criminal Justice that runs the Texas prison system has a centralized list of banned books, and that list contains 13,000 titles. So out of all of the books on the planet, there are 13,000 of them that they have sort of prevented from entering into Texas prisons because of objectionable content. Some of those titles are Shakespeare sonnets. A collection of Shakespeare sonnets was deemed to be too controversial for the poor prisoners to read. Another book by Jon Stewart, I believe his name is, host of The Daily Show, called America, is banned because it has nudity. Dante's Inferno is a title that is banned. Likewise, George Jackson's Soledad Brother, which is a classic piece of prison literature, was banned for being racist. Even though George Jackson was an African-American man, he used the word honky in the book, and so they said that was a racist book and could not be allowed into prisons because it was going to be too disruptive. However, Hitler's Mein Kampf is not on the banned book list, and that is freely accessible to Texas prisoners. There's a bunch of absurd facts to that case. But in any event, if you are in Texas, call me for special help, because you don't want to just fire off a prison project in Texas without a little bit of background knowledge about the peculiarities of their system. However, what I would recommend is for people to look into the continuing privatization of the prison industry. Surprisingly, and as everybody I'm sure is well aware, the population of prisoners is growing exponentially. I think it was only 10 years ago that there were only about 1.5 million people, and now we've almost doubled that. So, surprisingly, the response from the states has not been to engage in meaningful sentence reform or, say, decriminalize activities that are, responsible, the criminalization of which are responsible for so many people being in cages all across the country right now. What they've done is try to accommodate their expanding prison populations by cutting costs. And in a lot of cases, this means privatization of the prison industry. And so, if you'll start looking into that, you'll find that there are a couple of big players in the industry. Corrections Corporation of America and the GEO Group are the two biggest players. When it comes to the issue of censorship of materials, literature, or core protected speech, political speech, What I've noticed is that the private prison companies are the least likely to engage in any sort of censorship. Probably because they are acutely aware of the costs that are associated with censoring, legally protected materials like political speech. Whereas, with the government, it's simply other people's money. So there's a unique federal statute in Title 42, it's Section 1983, and 42 USC 1983 is a vestige of post-Civil War legal reform. But it wasn't until the 1960s that Section 1983 found a rebirth, a renaissance in civil rights litigation. And in fact, I think it was Nation of Islam publications case that was the birth of the application of the 1983 cases to prisons and jails. So Section 1983 essentially says that whenever a state or other government actor uses the color of law to deprive a person of his or her civil rights or constitutional rights or any other rights guaranteed by law, federal law that is, that's a tort claim. Basically, that's an actionable claim that people can sue the government over and wind up collecting money damages from the government for this violation. That statute, in conjunction with 42 USC 1988, which is the federal fee-shifting clause that provides for the award of attorney's fees payable by the loser of the litigation to the prevailing party, have made this enterprise very profitable for lawyers all across the country. What I see in my analysis of the case law on this topic is that it is a growth industry, and there are lawyers all across the country that are really just starting to learn about the fact that you can sue prisons and jails and the counties that operate them and the state officials who operate the prisons for violation of people's rights, and that you can make quite a bit of money doing so. And you can feel good about doing this sort of work while you're getting paid handsomely. So generally what they're looking for are good fact patterns that do not involve prisoners, because thanks to William Jefferson Clinton in 1996, the United States of America has a federal law, that a group of laws known as the Prison Litigation Reform Act. And the Prison Litigation Reform Act, or the PLRA as it is referred to, has done horrible things for the rights of prisoners in the past 15 years. Basically, this was a reaction to an onslaught of litigation brought by prisoners against their captors for the horrible conditions of their confinement. And in the 90s, I believe it was Orrin Hatch who really brought about this legal change that was devastating. Basically, what it requires prisoners to exhaust the grievance system, the internal grievance system, before they can go to court. It puts caps on attorney's fees and creates a handful of other really substantial hurdles to litigation for prisoners. So what you'll have is cases of simply horrible mistreatment of prisoners, awful brutality, and because they didn't fill out the paperwork properly inside the prison, they are barred from bringing a federal civil lawsuit over, the grievous injury that they have suffered. There is a peculiar case right now pending. There's cases that have even dismissed civil rights cases where you've got somebody who's suffered a brain injury and can't fill out the paperwork inside the prison. By the time the lawyer gets around to, discovering the case, learning about it from the client's parents or whoever, and then they bring the case to court and say, look, judge, this guy is incapable of filling out these forms to satisfy the requirement that he exhaust the grievance system before filing. And the judges have held, no, that's, there's nowhere in the law that it says that, there's an exception for people suffering brain injury, so case dismissed. They generally are going to side on the side of the prison and jail officials in cases like that. So basically, the Prison Litigation Reform Act really makes it undesirable for lawyers to represent prisoners unless they're dead, in which case there's no opportunity for them to file a grievance, and so the PLRA does not apply. Likewise, the PLRA does not apply to anybody that is not in a cage, and that includes prisoners that have been released. So as long as the other statutes of limitations have not expired yet, they can successfully bring civil lawsuits once they're outside of the cage. But if they're inside a cage, the PLRA applies, and they are not allowed to bring a civil lawsuit unless they have successfully danced through the maze of hurdles that Clinton and company put up in '96. So, the point of this little sidetrack there is to tell you that you have the opportunity to create delicious fact patterns for hungry civil rights lawyers all across this country, and I'll be more than happy to help step you through how to get it done. The PLRA does not apply so long as you remain outside of a cage, and you will be astounded at the proclivity of prison and jail staff to engage in activities that are in fact violations of your constitutional rights, because it is not the rights of the prisoners to receive this material, the literature, the news weekly, the monthly publication, the quarterly publication, whatever it is that you're writing down, your written words, your dangerous written words. It's your right. It's your First Amendment right that's at issue here. You have a First Amendment right, a protected constitutional right, to send out these messages to prisoners wherever they are, all across the world, no matter how dangerous, well, I shouldn't say all across the world, but all across America anyway, no matter how dangerous they are, or whatever their categorization is, you have the right to communicate to these prisoners. And so when the prison and jail officials step in your way and trample your First Amendment right to engage in protected political speech, and it doesn't even have to be political speech, although, that's how I generally advise you to sort of frame this stuff, because, that's a long tradition of case law that political speech is a core protected area of speech. That, there's plenty of strong case law out there that will back you up in your assertion that you have the right to get your message out to prisoners. So when you put your communication together and put your message together in writing and wrap it up in an envelope, or simply put it in a format for delivery by the Postal Service, and that is one of the drawbacks, is that you generally do have to use the United States Postal Service to accomplish these sorts of tasks, that once you get it delivered to the jail or prison, that they must deliver it to the prisoners, and if they do not, then they're engaging in censorship, illegal censorship of your protected political speech. So what you want to do is you want to generate a fact pattern that proves beyond any doubt that this is not an accident, that they're not, accidentally censoring your speech. You want to have them, we've had our magazine kicked back to us from a prison in New York, for example, where we have 30 subscribers at a prison in New York, and they decided late last year that they were no longer going to let our magazine, Prison Legal News, get into their prison because some of the ads that we run in there are for pen pal services. So, we don't care who wants to do a pen pal service. We don't care if the prison, has a rule or regulation that bans, their inmates from engaging in pen pal activity. If they don't like it, they can, they can certainly prevent their prisoners from engaging in that sort of activity. And it doesn't have to involve us, and it doesn't have to involve the censorship of, our magazine. That's not what we're about. We're not about a pen pal service. We're about, prison legal news, the news related to, lawsuits and litigation over conditions of confinement and prisoners and corruption. And so anyway, they boxed up 30 of our magazines, or about 30 of our magazines, to the prisoners in that facility and put them in a box and sent a little note that said, "Last warning." So there's no doubt that, and that wasn't the first month that they'd done it. We're a monthly publication. That was, I think that was 3 or 4 months into the game with them. So here we are. We're 3 or 4 months into, or 3 months into the new year now, and we'll be filing a lawsuit against the state of New York fairly soon. Because they haven't backed off. They've sent that stuff back to us. They continue to reject our publication. We've written a letter to them, "Dear Warden, please reconsider your position. This is an illegal activity that you're engaging in. You're not allowed to censor our protected political speech." And they use fairly polite language to tell us to go straight to hell. So that'll be a fun one. But in any event, that's what you want to do really, is you want to, by the time you wind up, approaching a lawyer, or, and you really do want to use a lawyer for stuff like this, because, it's a lot of hard work, it takes a lot of time, and frankly, they can get paid for it, and you can't unless you've got the magical paper from the state that says that, you're a lawyer. So, you want to generate a fact pattern that has a lot of documentary evidence of illegal censorship on the part of prison and jail officials. Really, I would suggest, anybody that really wants to start out, just start out by putting together, maybe even just a one-page trifold pamphlet. So it's really cheap to print. And you can zip off, say, 1,000 copies. Well, maybe you don't want to do that many, because still you're going to have to use postage on all these. So maybe 100 copies, and then identify say 100 prisoners who are only in for failure to license something properly, or drug dealing, or some sort of activity that basically should not be outlawed, but it is a crime against the state, and target your publication specifically to this sort of a prisoner who is going to be ready to receive the message that he or she should not be in that cage, because really what they did is not wrong. Then that's part of the recipe here. And the other part of the recipe is, if you get some really good stuff going on in your publication, you're also going to be spreading your message to the captors, the people that are working in the mailroom, that see your publication come in, and what the hell is this? Well, they're going to open it up and read it, and if they engage in the illegal activity of censorship, and they just trash your stuff, it's really not a terrible thing that's happening, because generally that means that down the road you're going to get reimbursed for that. You're going to get paid for your damages for them stepping on your rights that way. You just have to have the perseverance to continue on. So you want to identify a group of potential subscribers, and you want to open up the lines of communication with those people. You want to basically make sure that they understand that their speech to you, their written speech to you as a member of the news media, because you're engaging in the business, whether it's for profit or not for profit, of distributing political ideas. Since you're engaged in this business of distribution of ideas and free and speech, that you are a member of the media. So their communications out of the cage to you on the outside are protected speech, just like their communications would be to a lawyer. Like I said earlier on in the conversation here, we're not really going to. You're not really going to be successful in 100% of the cases of having those communications uncensored or unread. I have not seen any, and perhaps I'm doing it wrong, but I haven't seen any comments here in the chat section. And so if I'm missing people's comments or questions, I apologize about that. I'm using the Justin TV login section here with the chat, and so I'm not seeing anything else if anybody's asking any questions, but I see we've only got about 10 minutes left, so I'm not sure really how to address that. In any event, once your publication is in print, in physical form, and you've got the stamps on it, and you've got it addressed to prisoners, and you've got it out in the mail, and if you're able to get it inside and get it into the prisoners on the inside, great. Get your next issue ready. You might put in their contact information for feedback, for them to write back to you to tell you about the publication itself, what they liked about it, what they didn't like. You definitely want to have capacity to take donations to cover postage. Other financing options are, when I talked about the project of books to prisoners, soliciting donations of books, and if people give you coffee table books, prisoners aren't really going to want that, and you don't really want to focus on that kind of stuff anyway. You want to focus on, books and other literature that have the political message that that you agree with, which is the message of freedom. So you get these coffee table book donations, you pop them on eBay and you unload them for $5, $10, $15. That'll cover quite a bit of postage for the distribution of your newsletter. When you run into a situation where you're being censored, and sometimes you'll be lucky enough to get this stuff kicked back to you, returned to sender, with colorful comments on it. That's great evidence, and what you want to do is you want to send it again. Send it, even the same issue, send it right back, or churn out the next month's issue and send that again, or the next week's issue and send that again, and see what happens, and follow up with letters to the prisoners. And when you've got 30, 40, 50 pieces of mail that are returned to you, and or you've got documentation from the prison or jail talking about the reasons why they're not going to let you send in your stuff, then you've got the makings of a nice little lawsuit for your local civil rights lawyers. So not only can you help support your local civil rights lawyers, you can also keep the lawyers for the government engaged in defending your lawsuits. And while they're busy working defending your lawsuits, they are unable to aggressively pursue other potential victims, and so you're helping out that way. You're also generally teaching them, one way or another, that it's a bad idea to engage in the initiation of force. Of course, some people won't ever, understand that, or are less likely to understand that when they are in the business of directly profiting from the initiation of force against people, but nonetheless, it makes for a jolly good time. If anybody has any questions about this topic or wants to contact me directly, feel free to do so. My email is lance@lanceweber.com. That's LANCE, and my last name is WEBER. So Lance@lanceweber.com is my email address. My telephone number is 802-257-1342 here at the office. That's 802-257-1342. And I'm also on Facebook. Lance Weber is my name. And I really wish that I could have seen some of the comments to sort of make this a little bit more of an interactive deal. I apologize for not getting that done, and I hope that I've been persuasive as far as, firing up some people, getting them excited about getting in the business of outreach to prisoners. Like I said, there's 2.5 million people sitting in cages right now, everywhere across this country, who, even if just a very small percentage of those 2.5 million people are of a like mind and are willing to, take some activity toward the enhancement of liberty and the, take an aggressive action against the institutionalization of the initiation of force known as the state. That can be a huge boon to the freedom movement, the liberty movement in general. Just one person can have a humongous impact. So, if we could, within the next year, turn 100 prisoners into activists, that would just, I think that would really have the potential to have a massive impact on the advancement of our cause here. Of course, I would finally, recommend that everyone use caution in dealing with prisoners. Naturally, you're going to find some people who are in cages who will have a tendency to try to deceive you or manipulate you. So, of course, use common sense. If you find that people on the inside want you to do things like, run errands for them or, engage in correspondence for them, there are actually services that will, there are companies that provide those sorts of services for prisoners, or, you could set up a side business doing that kind of stuff for prisoners. That it's a need that the market exists, the market's real, and don't just assume that because people are imprisoned somewhere that they don't have any money or don't have any resources. There's plenty of prisoners that have financial resources that they can use to accomplish the tasks that they need to get done. So make sure you keep your eyes on the prize as far as what your objectives are and what you want to accomplish, which is the dissemination of your political message. And meanwhile, stay aware of the infringement of your rights to communicate with these people. Let's see, I guess really, it's freedom of speech, and there's also the freedom of association under the First Amendment, sort of an umbrella. That's another right that is commonly invoked when people sue prison and jail officials over illegal censorship. I guess finally what I would mention to people back on the topic of privatization of prisons and private prisons that are out there that have contracts with state or local governmental agencies is that these private prisons are entities that can be sued under Section 1983, and that statute was designed for use only against governmental entities. So there's case law that's held that these private prisons are performing a governmental function and that they can be sued just like any other governmental entity. and they do not get to avail themselves of the defense of qualified immunity, which is basically a qualified sovereign immunity, which says, you can't sue them so long as, the conduct in which they were engaging, even though it was illegal, would not reasonably be known to be illegal by, your average Joe Schmo copper. So, the private prisons, like I said, do not get to avail themselves of that defense. So they are particularly susceptible to litigation for infringements of constitutional rights. And like I said, you're less likely to run into any problems with censorship reaching out to prisoners in private prisons anyway. Well, I guess I'm going to log off, and thank you for watching and engaging in this little activity here. And thanks, George Donnelly, for having this forum. And I wish everybody the best of luck, and I look forward to getting contacted by some of you looking for some help or assistance in getting your newsletters or publications off the ground. Talk to you later.